Hello and welcome to the Wolves Report. I'm Ryan Leicester and thank you for joining us for episode 61. Tonight we'll be analysing and reacting to Wolves' 2-1 defeat at Leicester and then going straight ahead to looking at the Palace game on Tuesday. Shorter episode this evening, taking the questions out because of the proximity between the games, and obviously these two gents as well as me, we're all hurting from yesterday afternoon. Let's get straight into business. But before we do, there's a loyal watcher called Bert Smith that watches every week. So big shout out to you, Bert, and thank you for your loyalty and being part of the show. Yesterday, it finished Leicester City 2, Wolverhampton Wanderers 1. I was there with Mark Knock and Chris Tyler, my co-hosts of the Wolves Report. Knocker, your take on Wolves' defeat yesterday?
Frustrating more than anything else. It was a game that we didn't need to lose. I felt first 35 minutes we were fully in control of the game, scored a really good goal, lovely passing movement. I thought we were controlling midfield. Lemina and Gomez were in full charge of that area. Didn't look in danger. I could only see Wolves scoring again. I didn't see any way we were going to lose the game. And then for some reason, Jose Sá goes walkabout, takes out Jamie Vardy, and I've got no idea what he's doing. Just stand on the corner of your 6-yard box. Vardy's going out to the corner flag. No need to do what he's done, but he's giving away a penalty, and they've made it 1-1. And after that, I don't think we really influenced the game much. After that, I felt that Leicester were probably the better team. Some strange substitutions that I didn't really understand. Change of formation. We got Cunha playing as well as he had. For some reason, we decided to change formation, put him isolated in a position that we know he can't play. He's not comfortable in that position. These players around him, we've seen how effective he is with players around him. So we left him in a position where he's isolated. We brought Hwang on, Coutinho on when the game was absolutely screaming out for Adama Traore or Podence earlier. There's so much room in behind that back line and the space between midfield to defence, because they were playing almost a 4-2-4. It gave us so much room that we could have played Traore into, and for some reason we decided to go a different way, switch to a formation that didn't work. We narrowed the midfield, and after that Leicester had full control of it, and we got what we deserved really. Saying that, we could have maybe had a point if the VAR was working, but I'm guessing that there was not enough cameras again. But I don't think we'd have really deserved it, to be honest. I think on the balance of what we did after that 35 minutes, we probably got what we deserved.
Tyler, I guess I think when we spoke about it on the way home, all three of us were all in the same boat with how we feel. But Jose Sá, we'll talk about that separately. But in terms of, I want to talk about the tactics. I want to talk about a second half that looked to me like the first half away at Forest. The 4 centre midfielders, an isolated forward. It was repeated what we'd seen and what we hope wouldn't see again.
Yeah, with Nocky summed the game up perfectly. Well, we were all there at Forest and we all saw how bad it was and how it doesn't work. I don't know how many times we talked about it, where it doesn't work. If you want to change it, put Núñez inside into midfield and bring a winger on, bring Adama or opponents on, and tuck Núñez in the middle. That's his natural position. Let's not forget, lost all control of the game. I mean, Lemina and Gomez, superb. I've not got enough good things to say about them. I thought first half they were absolutely outstanding. And João Gomez he's going to be one hell of a player, isn't he? I mean, I said to you on the way home, apart from probably had a couple of signings by that point, but apart from Angola and Kante, I can't think of anyone who recovers the ball better than him. Like, genuinely, never seen anyone do it that effectively. But you weren't talking about him, you were talking about tactics. So I'd have put Núñez inside, I'd have brought the winger on, I'd have kept the shape as it was. Costa was fuming to come off. He didn't need to come off. Whether he's thinking we've got 2 games in a short space of time and he's saving him, but
maybe that was the thinking with Adama as well.
Well, maybe. But look at on the bench. If you've got Neto, Podence, Hwang, Adama, you've got 4 genuine forward options. There's no reason to change the system. There's no reason whatsoever. Me and Knocker have a ding-dong about Sarabia until we're blue in the face. Fine, bring him off, but make it like for like. No need to change it. That's what those options are for. So I think as soon as we did that, we just gave the impetus back to Leicester, and fair play to them. They took it, and second half, yeah, like Knocker said, they had the chances, didn't they? Saar made a couple of good saves. We could have nicked a point. Whether we deserved it, I don't know. But the positives were the first half an hour, 40 minutes. Those 2 in midfield were outstanding.
You are listening to and watching episode 61 of the Wolves Report with Chris, Tyler, Mark Knock and myself, Ryan Leicester. Shorter episode this week, but we are partly way through analysing Leicester City 2, Wolverhampton Wanderers 1. Let's just go on to... Let's start on a positive then. We talked about the midfielders, so let's wax a little bit more about them. As you rightly said, Tyler, João Gomez, I don't... An opening half of football, I don't remember anybody winning the ball back as much. And that's sort of putting Lamina in the shadows, Nocky, even though it was his work that set up, which was a brilliant finish.
They just complement each other really well, don't they? I mean, there was the fantastic video Wolves put out with Lamina and that little lad, and during that he said, I'll win the ball, I'll tackle and I'll pass. And that's exactly what he did for the goal. He took the ball off Tielemans, passed it, and Kuna finishes it. So, yeah, he's not wrong. Can we just
clarify? It's a garden building, not a summer house. Just for clarification.
Yeah, for those listening via Spotify, Achillo said Tyler's summer house in the background is bigger than my house. Yeah, I've been to Tyler's. It's like a palace. The man lives. It's like having a king on the. It's like having a king on the show.
Yeah, sorry. He brings us into the middle class, doesn't he? Yeah, it was just they work so well together. I mean, I've seen a few people say some things about Neves, which I don't agree with. I had no issue with Neves coming on because the guy's a top class footballer, but the reason it hurt us a little bit was because of how well those two were playing together, how efficient they were, and they just seem to have this understanding, don't they? One goes, one stays, then the other one goes, the other one stays. They've just got such an understanding, and all they do is just win the ball and play it to the playmakers, and it was so effective. And I don't think I've ever seen Tielemans in particular so quiet in a football match, because he was controlled. Every time he got the ball, someone was pouncing on him.
Wasn't it him that was mugged for the goal?
It was him who was mugged for the goal, yeah. And that's just Lamina doing what he does. He goes in, he breaks a tackle up, wins the ball back, and he gives it to an attacking player. And I thought them two. I agree with Chris. I can't remember ever seeing a midfielder win the ball back in the way that João Gomez does, and he celebrates every tackle, and he's ferocious, and he gets booked a lot because of the way he plays, and we have to accept that as part of his game. But it's something about him that this kid's going absolutely all the way to the top, because he's just ferocious, and with Lamina next to him, it works absolutely perfectly.
Yeah, 4 bookings in 7 games. If anyone wants to correct me on that, I believe that's, and I believe the booking ban window, the cutoff was yesterday. So somehow he's managed to get booked in nearly 60% of his games and avoid a suspension. So yeah, respect for that. What a footballer. Tyler, moving on to the goal. Obviously, it was the midfielder's hard work that recovered the ball, but that's the finish of a £40 million footballer. That's the guy who's shown flashes of what he could do. Took a touch, opened it up, and absolutely picked his spot.
Yeah, good goal. Yeah, it was. I don't remember scoring a goal like that, really, nicking it in the final third. And nice to see a forward or a striker finally have a bit of conviction, take a touch, bang, goal. And
buried it.
We don't do that enough, yeah. And I thought the front four were, and I'm sorry in that I mean Costa, Kuna, Sarabia, and Nunes. I thought they were outstanding as well. First half, some of the link-up play was as good as I can remember seeing for a long time. And the only problem is we didn't get the second goal. We had a couple of sniffs, didn't we? A couple of half chances. And if the second goes in, it's, dead and buried, isn't it? It's game over. But yeah, Kuna took his goal well. He was lively. But we've come to expect that performance now. Now he's off Costa. Costa didn't have his best game, but
his presence allows Kuna to play.
Yeah, still so effective. And as soon as he went off, we might as well have just gone home, like genuinely. Because without that focal point there, the Leicester centre halves then had all the time in the world. It just made it so easy for them. And for the life of me, I don't understand that substitution. I don't think I ever will. But on the positives, yeah, first 35, 40 minutes, we were excellent.
Bringing the positives into an unfortunate negative. Now, this is, I'd say it's probably a 90%, 10% split on in terms of what people have talked about. I'm totally blaming Jose Sarr. Now, he may have slipped and gone down in the process, but he had no, as Nocky said yesterday, he had no business coming out. The guy, he's running away from goal. If you patrol your 6-yard box, you've got a defender coming across the cover. Vardy's not going to score from there. He's not clean on goal. Jose Sarr does some magnificent things. He also does some frustrating things. For me, that was the beginning of the end. It's not his fault, but it's his fault that Wolves conceded that goal, Knocker.
I completely agree. And I know that Wolves tweeted that it was a slip. It wasn't a slip. He came out. It was almost a stamp on Vardy. He kind of gets stuck in his boots, and then as Vardy goes down, it drags him down. It wasn't a slip for me. It was a really awful piece of goalkeeping.
Either way, he shouldn't have been there.
Shouldn't have been there. No, I mean you had players covering. Vardy's going wide. I mean, I'm not a goalkeeper. I don't claim to be an expert on goalkeeping, but for me, you just protect the corner of your 6-yard box, and he's either going to try and hit it left-footed and you've covered the space, or he's going to try and cut inside, at which point you've got your defenders back. There was no need to go and meet him there. It was just a completely reckless, ridiculous decision, and it's not the first one he's done, if we're being honest. He's done them before, and as much as he is a good shot stopper, I'm convinced we'll be looking for an upgrade next season, because with the ball at his feet, he frightens the life out of me. I mean, I think 2 minutes into the second half, he ends up trying to take on a striker inside the penalty area because he's not controlled the situation quickly enough. And the game's moved on now. It's not just about being a shot stopper. You've got to have a multitude of skills to play in that position. You've got to be a sweeper. You've got to be good with the ball at your feet. Your kicking's got to be good. But far too often he looks panicky on the ball, passes us into trouble, or he just lumps the ball straight out of play. So as good as he's been for Wolves, and I do think he's been good for Wolves, if we're going to move forward, we need to really address that position, in my opinion.
You are listening and watching to episode 61 of the Wolves Report with Mark Knott, Chris Tyler and myself, Ryan Leicester. The show is recorded live and goes out live on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. Neil Lewis, Joanna, Chilo, Josia and Joanna and Joe have all commented. If you want to drop a comment in the Facebook comments or the YouTube, we'll do our best to get them up on the screen. If they're a great insult to one of the pundits or it's a good football comment, we'll go with either one of those. Moving on to the second half, Tyler, it felt like it was just, we mentioned it earlier, we'd seen 4 midfielders at Forest. Wolves were very fortunate. If it wasn't for a brilliant bit of Daniel Prudent's individual skill, we've lost at Forest, and the league table looks a little bit different to it does now. But were Wolves trying to tuck in? Were they happy with the point? I find it really hard to understand. The bit that frustrated me the most is, we've all said it, you guys called it before me. It doesn't look like Kuna's physically ready to be a number 9. He looks like a floating 10, someone that drops deep, he links play, he can score from the edge of the box, he can set goals up for others. We've seen this. But if you isolate him, you're totally losing out. There's 2 ginormous centre-backs that are totally dominated him. And then it's nothing against Moutinho, but Moutinho in the 10, it just doesn't work. He can't support. If Kuna maybe had someone close to him, maybe Kuna would look a bit better. But when he's got no one to link the play, and then you've got 3 holding midfielders, he's got no chance.
Yeah, I think you've answered your own question. I'm with you. I just don't understand it. Lemina was a loss, but Neves is the like-for-like change. So I think that was the start at the end as well, because I mean we've all whacked lyric about Neves, and rightly so. Unbelievable footballer, but there's no denying for the 2.5 games he hasn't played, we've been better. And I'll have that argument with anybody. For those 2.5 games, we've looked a better side. We've looked a more complete outfit. But you could see in the second half, every time we got the ball, we were just looking to pass it to him. 5 yards here and there.
Would you say though, Tyler, in fairness to Neves, we've seen the performance v Liverpool when he played in the 2 and he pushed high. He's not going to cover the groundwork of Joe Gomez or Mario Lemina, because that's not his game. However, we have seen that he can press and play higher up. I think the reason for those 2 games, it may have been to do with Neves, but the biggest reason for me is that we played 2 up front, and it made Wolves look a threat throughout and allowed us to defend through the front. But what I would say didn't work in Neves' favour is if you have Moutinho on the pitch, then you've already got 2 midfielders. To collect the ball, Neves has to come deeper.
Yeah, that's a good argument, and that is fair. I still don't think he'd do the job as effectively as Gomez and Lemina, but on the ball, he's the best player we've got by a mile. So then, like you said, if you're then taking off your forward options, what's the point? There's no point having him there. You can easily took Podent. You could have took Sarabia into the 10, and like I said, brought Nunes in midfield. The options on the bench were ridiculous, and Hwang and Moutinho just weren't the right substitutions. Hwang, I'm sorry, I was disgusted with yesterday because well, it's too early for me to swear, but he didn't go into tackles. He lost the ball far too easily. To me, he didn't look interested. Howard Dahmer's not come on. I've got absolutely no idea. We've praised and we've criticised the manager, rightly so. And what he's done has been fantastic. And this isn't a criticism, but you can only call it if you see it. Moutinho off Kuna, for as long as I'm on this planet is never going to work as a front two in a million years. So I just think he got it wrong. He's got it right on occasions, and I think yesterday he got it wrong.
Absolutely. Well, overall, Wolves were 4 adrift and bottom of the league again, on Boxing Day, and now we're probably 1 win off safety. We'll have all taken that. We've given him lots of praise. However, if you're prepared to take praise, you've got to take criticism as well. He's not perfect. He knows he's not perfect. But for me, yesterday, the manager's got to look at his changes, and Jose Sarr, a combination of both, of why Wolves have come away with nothing. This is one I've got lined up for you, Nocky. And this is one that we were debating about on the way home. Pablo Sarabia. Now, we debate this guy a lot. Now, but what I would, but what you've got to say, I'm going to open this up to give him a little bit of praise, is when he's on, and I know we were stood next to each other, and he gave the ball away in the first half and then he cost us a goal. But what he does link the play. Now, when Hwang comes on and Sarabia comes off, there's no football compatibility on that side of the pitch whatsoever. I know he frustrates you, Nocky, but he feels like he's a better footballer than Hwang. I don't think that's an argument. But yeah, lucky Pablo Sarabia.
I think Sarabia is a very, very good footballer, but I don't think he has the pace to play out in a wide position in the Premier League. I just don't think he's got it. I agree with Chris. I'd have moved him into the 10 position and see what he can do from there, because one thing he's got that he does very well.
We did that with Liverpool.
Passing, one touch passing, link up play. He can find them passes. But if you're asking him to go and do a job on a left wing, you're not going to get anything out of him. You're going to destroy him as a player because he cannot play that position, in my opinion. I just think he's too isolated out there. If you're going to play that kind of system, you need someone with a bit of pace in that position. So for me, I think there is a footballer there, but I think he needs to play in a more compact position in midfield where he can really dictate the play rather than being reliant on him. Because I mean, if you look at the Leicester team we played, they were missing 4 of the best players, and then they ended up taking another 2 of the best players off. So there was plenty of space and there was a lack of quality in that Leicester team that he could have really exploited if we'd have moved him into the right position. But we ended up at one point with João Gomez playing as a number 10. We ended up with players just swamping all areas. And then I looked at Cunha and he's completely isolated with three big lads around him. I mean, what do we expect him to do? So the system for me works, but you use your personnel the right way. Hwang was awful when he came on. I would have moved Sarabia into that midfield area, or maybe played him in behind a striker, gone 4-2-3-1 to try and put the pressure on him a little bit. And then I would have brought Podence or Adama on to try and play down the left. So I'm not Sarabia's biggest fan, I'll admit that, but I do think there is a footballer there if we use him right.
But why is he desperate to get Hwang on the pitch? He's desperate to, isn't he? And I totally get it. Like was it the Brentford game where it's a like for like for Costa and you're playing him up front? I totally understand. But
when you put him in a creative position, you nearly find yourself.
He's not. I don't think how he's come on yesterday over Podence, Neto, Adama. I'm all ears for. I'd love to know the justification on that.
It's a winnable game, isn't it? I mean, we took Costa off because we've got 3 games in a week. Forget the 3 games in a week. We are in a position to win a football match against a weakened side in the bottom 3. You play your strongest players. And for me, if it's a toss-up between Hwang and Adama, it's an absolute no-brainer. If it's a choice between Costa and Hwang, that's a no-brainer as well. So bringing Hwang on was strange. It didn't impact us in a positive way at all because he just seems to go off on a tangent, get his head down, and he just runs in whichever direction he happens to be facing at the time. He's playing a different game. Yeah. He's not an intelligent footballer, is what I would say about him. And we've got players who are intelligent. So the Hwang one absolutely baffled me as well, in all honesty. And I think he only came on because he scored against Brentford. Is my only rationale for him coming on.
I get that change. If it's for Costa, a like for like, I get it. Play him up front and have Cunha off him. I understand that. But sticking him on the left wing,
you're killing Cunha as well, aren't you?
Killed us.
You're taking Cunha out of the game by doing that as well, aren't you? Because you're isolating him. He's not comfortable there. He feeds off players around him. Look at the movement when Lamina broke up the play. As soon as he saw Lamina steaming in, he's already on his bike, getting him into a goal-scoring position. He can't do that on his own, but he's a fabulous, fabulous footballer that, with a player alongside him, I think he can get us double figures next season. I think he'll create a lot more as well. But if we're isolating him, you play him in that position that he finished with yesterday, and you'll be lucky to get 2 goals a season out of him.
And I know I like my stats, and positional averages. Against Liverpool, Sarabia played further up through the middle than Cunha did. And how good was that performance? So when we made the changes yesterday, backing up what you two have both said, why couldn't we do that? Why couldn't we put them two? Because them two can clearly link. They press well. They're both intelligent. I know Costa. I don't know. I haven't seen this, but apparently Costa was frustrated at being subbed, and it turns out he was right because Wolves lost the game. But it just felt like a massive own goal yesterday. If we'd have come away from a point after that first half, I'd have been like, well, I'd have taken a point before, but I'd be a bit disappointed. But to be totally dominating that game of football when there was only one team that was going to score next, and one headless chicken moment, and the subs have totally shot us in the foot. Now, you know what? Sarr made a couple of good of the saves throughout the game, a couple of blocks and that. And I'm not saying he's made up for it because it was the beginning and the end. So it wasn't a total calamity, but it's a mistake that was the beginning and the end of the game. And that's really frustrating when I think you said, Nocky, that's it. Just click like that. And all of a sudden now Leicester were pushing for a second goal before half time and our heads have completely gone. I wasn't going to do any questions this week because there was not a lot of time, but this feels quite relevant. Andrew Caddick says, if we get nothing more from the remaining games and the end of the season on 34 points, will we stay up? Oof, I don't think we were that bad yesterday, Andrew. But yeah, Nocky, great question.
I think it'll be tight. I still think we need another win. I think 37 for me is the threshold. If we hit that, anything over 35, I think we'll be okay. 34, I think we'd still probably be in it on the last game of the season.
Tyler? Be close, wouldn't it?
I think so. I think we need one more point. I think 35 with our goal difference is basically 36. And that's
so that basically means from there, that would rely on Forest winning 3 because if they drew 1 and won 2, their goal average is way worse than ours, and Everton would need to win 2 and we lose every game. That's the reality of where we're at with those now.
I think Forest will go. I think Everton could potentially win 2. I think they could win a couple of games 1-0. I think they've got that in them. So Knocker's right. I mean, if we want to be 100% sure of it, if we can't get 1 win out the last 6, then we get what we deserve, don't we? But I don't know. I've just got a feeling I think we'll get it done Tuesday, if I'm honest. And I think, like I said, a point's probably enough. But 40 is always the threshold. We won't need 40, but that's always the target, isn't it? Because then it's 100% guaranteed. So
absolutely. Well, I mean, the results-wise, I mean, Everton got a point at Palace. Didn't look like the best of games. Forest, by all means, played quite well at Liverpool, but got nothing. No one's really talking about Leeds. They seem to have beaten us and then just fallen off the wagon completely. They're getting drawn back into it. And Southampton, 2 up at the champion contenders. They look like they're done now. That's probably absolutely ruined them. So I agree.
The chances of 5 teams, the chances of 3 of them overtaking us is very small, isn't it? Let's be honest. So.
Great question, Andrew. Thank you for your contribution. You're listening and watching to episode 61 of the Wolves Report with Mark Knott, Chris Tyler and myself, Ryan Leicester, coming the end to analysing Leicester City 2, Wolverhampton Wanderers 1. I was going to try and pull some positives from the second half, but I don't think there was any. One thing that really frustrated me, and we mentioned it earlier on, we didn't talk about it. I don't understand why Matheus Nunes wasn't taken off for Adama Traore right now. Matheus has had a good couple of games, one brilliant goal, one really good assist, sort of worked the ball into that area after his good work on wide right. But he wasn't having a great game on Saturday. And time again, there was space in behind Leicester. There was space there. And for one of the fastest players in the Premier League to play the ball in front of him where there's so much space, Nocky, why didn't we use Adama Traore?
I really don't know. And he may even have been a better option than bringing Neves on, in all honesty. It might have been better moving him into that area because he's got a little bit more in terms of pace. He's got the legs on him. So that may have been a better decision than you bring Adama.
Or maybe instead of Martinho.
Yeah, I mean, when Lamina goes off. So if Lamina goes off,
that's the perfect game for me, Nunes, centre midfield.
Yeah.
It's the perfect game for him to pick it up. It was so open, wide open. Leicester were basically...
Yeah, and you could see there what the Leicester's midfield pair didn't have the legs on the Wolves pair. Now, a few people did mention as well, I've seen it on Twitter, I think they brought Dewsbury Hall on centre midfield, which would have given them another number in there. Yeah. But does that dictate to us that we should change our shape and nullify ourselves? Sometimes you go like for like, But sometimes if you go like for like, you're playing into the opposite opponent's hands. And by taking a forward off, we played into Leicester's hands, let them go forward and win the game. So although some people would say, well, he was going like for like, it turned out it was the wrong thing. Why don't we leave it?
Sorry, mate, I didn't mean to jump in. It felt to me like he was desperate to start Neves, and he needed a reason to try and get him back in, because the sensible option for me would have been, when you lose Lamina, don't change your shape at all. You just bring Nunes across, you bring Adama or Podence onto the right, and you keep your shape, you keep your system, because they put three in the middle because we were battering them in that area, and they're putting three in the middle, there's going to be space somewhere else to play, and I'll be comfortable that those two would have been intelligent enough to find those spaces. The problem when you bring Neves on, much as I love the guy's pieces and I think he's top class, he hasn't got that pace that Nunes has got. So you're naturally going to struggle in midfield, and you're going to need a third player to support him.
It did feel like a game where we clearly had the legs on a team that was shot to pieces. Yeah. And you could see, I think Lamina pushed the ball forward a few times. Joe Gomez did it. Anyone running with the ball in the middle of the park. And it was ready-made for Matheus Nunes to pick the ball up. But we live and learn.
And to be fair to Neves, even he was doing that second half. He was taking, because there's so much space.
Yeah.
You could take it 15, 20 yards forward, and even Neves was doing it. I just think he got it wrong. We've talked about getting it right, and the appointment's been unbelievable, and it's not criticism. It's just saying what we see. What we saw yesterday, second half, wasn't good enough.
No.
And it was strange tactically. And some people defended the substitutions, but then in their own breath, then admitted they didn't work. So it's almost like, which one do you want to go with? For me, it was just a game crying out. It's just a simple shift to put Nunes inside and bring either Neto, Adama, Podence, any of them.
Interesting one, a bit of debate. Ethan Howe says Chan's good, you're using him as a scapegoat. Well, he came on last week, Ethan. He scored a couple of good goals. But my point with Hwang is, in terms of the wide forwards, he's the one you could trust the most defensively because you'll support his fullback. However, he's the least technically gifted of our wide forwards and the least creative. So for me, he's someone that sees a game out instead of Costa, that plays through the middle. Yeah. He's someone that you play against a superior opponent like Liverpool at Molineux when you can press a vulnerable team. So yeah, I mean, entitled to your opinion, Ethan, and I appreciate you putting it on there. But I'm not blaming Hwang, and I don't think the guys are blaming him. I just think we understood the substitution when you're taking a technical player up that can open the door, as opposed to Hwang, who's going to press.
He's not a scapegoat. He's not a scapegoat at all. The fact is, he came on, he didn't impact the game whatsoever because it was the wrong substitution. I mean, I was waxing lyrical about him after the Brentford game because of his movement. I've been quite positive about Hwang.
His movement, as a number 9, his movement off the ball is very good.
But if anything, I want to see him out.
Without the ball, without sounding rude, without the ball, he's fantastic. But this is a game where we had a lot of the ball, and you need your creative players who can get on the ball and make something happen. It just wasn't the right game for him. The substitution at Brentford was spot on. It's fresh legs up front. He got the second goal, perfect. But you boys have hit the nail on the head. When you're taking off a creative player who's getting so much time on the ball, make it a like-for-like substitution.
Absolutely. I just want to take the mood up a little bit, and one of my favourite bits of the day, and this isn't really football related, it's fan related, was the Kuna song. Now, I've got to say, that's the loudest I've heard an away end for a long time. After your £40 million forwards took a touch and absolutely wellied it in the far corner, I don't know if it was instep or laces, but he's buried it. The tequila song for Kuna was absolutely fantastic. Thoroughly enjoyed being part of that, and it was great. I mean, I was stood with Nocky. Tyler was a bit further down, but it was great scenes to see that wasn't Nocky. It was a proper away end bounce, and it was. I mean, it's a terrible song, but it's also brilliant because it's easy. But for that 5 minutes, it was booming out and it was fun. And football's supposed to be fun.
Yeah, I think credit to Leicester as well, because even though their predicament, there was a really good atmosphere in the stadium.
Yeah, they were good.
And you feed off that as an away supporter, don't you? Because if it's a quiet, you go to Anfield and it's almost boring because there's no noise coming out of it. But when you're at a ground like that or a ground like Leeds, where the fans are backing their team, it does give you that lift. And I think the way that away end's set up as well, where you're curled, so you're all pretty close to each other, it just intensifies it. But the Cunha song was brilliant. I mean, he's an awful song. We've got some absolutely horrendous songs, but when you're in the away end, you couldn't care less. You're booming them out with everyone else, aren't you? Because it's just a phenomenal experience to be involved in it.
Absolutely. Just one more point. Zach Starr asks about Semedo, and I think this is a fair point. For someone that had been very good recently, I think he struggled probably in the first half. He was probably Wolves' flakiest player in the first half. Tyler, it was an unusually average to poor game for Nelson Semedo, someone who's probably been one of the most consistent performances in Lopetegui. Thanks for your question, Zach.
Yeah. I think you've got it right. And I'm not knocking him or criticising him because he's been outstanding, and you can't maintain those levels. And he had his hands full. Leicester were playing like 4-2-4.
4 strikers, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't easy for the back line, and yeah, just one of those games where he just looked a little bit off the pace. But I'm not going to criticise him because, like I said, I think he's been excellent. But yeah, I thought he was bang average stroke poor on Saturday.
Yeah, it was a weird setup, Zach, because Leicester left so much space in the middle. It was like an old school 1950s 4-2-4. It was such a confusing setup. There was like, how are you playing 4 strikers? But it was working quite well until we made the changes. And I think if Wolves hadn't made the changes, Leicester may have scored, but I think Wolves would have continued to threat because Costa, although not being overly effective, he was creating space for his teammates. So yeah, I know I sort of went off track a bit then, Zach, but appreciate your question. I think that sums up the analysis of the game, but there's one particular point about the match I want to move on to. Nocky posted earlier on today the video of the decision when Wout Fez, or whatever his name is, put his arm up and somehow a penalty wasn't given. Now, I want to make it abundantly clear, absolutely crystal clear, that is not an excuse for why Wolves lost. Wolves lost because they were rubbish for the last hour of that game. There was no other reason. But I do think Wolves were denied, Nocky, a clear goal-scoring opportunity from the penalty spot. Because if your arm is up here and it hits the ball away, my opinion is that's a penalty. That is not a natural position unless you're doing the chicken dance.
Yeah, I mean, people will say it's an excuse. It's not an excuse, but
we're not making an excuse, but we've been denied a penalty.
If you're being honest, it's a get-out-of-jail-free card, isn't it? Because we've put ourselves in a position and we should have had a penalty. And I've seen all these, there's different permutations to the rule. There's different. For me, he jumps out, the arm's not in a natural position, he doesn't header it, and he clears it out the penalty area.
But his arm swings and it makes a clean connection, and the ball flies away. It's not a nick or a deflection. It's cleared it out the box. And if you're swinging your arm like that and it hits the ball, how many times have we seen penalties given against us for things like that?
Well, you compare it to when we went down there during COVID and Max Kilman gives away a penalty. The ball hits him exactly the same position from 4 or 5 yards away. This is from a corner. So this is from a corner into the penalty area. So he's got the whole of that to flight the ball and hits him on the arm. So for me, it's a penalty. I don't see any incarnation of the rule that would say that is not a penalty. It's clearly a penalty. It hits his arm. The ball bounces out of the area because it strikes his arm. If it doesn't hit his arm, for all we know, it bounces through to a Wolves player, and we took it away for 2-2. We probably wouldn't because our corners are wretched, but the point is you've got an opportunity to do that, and that was taken away from us. So for me, I struggle to see why it's not a penalty. I really do. I don't understand it. And if it is, I judge it by how would I feel if the opposition got it, and if the opposition got it, I think I'd struggle to complain.
Tyler, it's another one on the list. It does feel a bit personal, and as me and Nocky have made really clear, we're not using an excuse. It's not an excuse for Wolves' performance or Wolves' massive giveaway of 3 points and a couple of goals which should have been coming home with us. However, Wolves are denied the opportunity of taking a point home, and I just can't understand if the officials should be like, you know what, it's pretty close. You probably need to look at the monitor and decide for yourself on this one. Again, why is he not being told to go and look at the monitor? How can there's VAR and there's a VAR assistant. These are professionals that watch football. They get paid to make decisions to guide the official. Everyone, Mark Halsey commented on Knocker's post today. If that's given, they're not going to overturn that. So therefore, it's probably a penalty. So tell me how, Tyler, the officials aren't being asked to look at the monitor. I am amazed.
I don't know. I replied to Knocker's tweet, and for me, I'm not just saying it, it's the clearest penalty I think I've ever seen. I don't see how there's a clearer penalty than that. Like Knocker said, the ball's travelled probably 30, 35 yards, and he's handled it out of the ball. He's cleared the ball with his hand. Like we've talked about the Jimenez one at Newcastle, the one against Brentford. You could argue they're subjective still because how much contact is there? has it gone down easy? This isn't subjective. This is the clearest handball I've ever seen for a penalty. And the fact they've not had a look at it or referred it, I mean, we've said it before, but where do they go from here? Because no one's got a clue anymore, have they? The Trent Alexander-Arnold one in the week against Leeds, I mean, yeah, we don't want Leeds to do well. It's the clearest handball in the build-up to a goal I've ever seen.
Joe says if he did not hit his arm, Dawson would have headed it.
Maybe not.
But we don't know, Joe, but the point is we were denied the opportunity. So, yeah. I mean, it's...
That's what the rules are there for, that if he does it, it's a penalty all day long. I don't know. I'm with you. I just don't understand it.
I mean, it would have been a robbery because the second half Wolves were. They had lots of the ball near the end of the game, but it went left, right, with nobody know what to do with it. And then Coonan stuck in between two massive centre backs, and then there's three centre midfielders and two wide players, and the ball's just doing that for the last 20 minutes. So. Very, very frustrating. Moving away from match analysis, we've got a massive game on Tuesday night at Molineux where Wolves host Crystal Palace, a team that recently, Nocky, that have got the better of Wolves, home and away, quite a few seasons. I think Wolves beat them in the Cup. I don't remember too many of them. You may correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I feel like Palace have physically had the one number over Wolves in centre midfield, particularly when it was Neves and Moutinho, and they have three very strong athletic footballers and just sort of seem to bully us. I don't think there's a Haas playing. They drew 0-0 on Saturday at home to Everton in quite a close game, Nocky. But your take and what you think the approach is for Wolves' game against Palace on Tuesday evening?
I don't think it's a recent thing with Palace beating us. I remember, I think it was Chris Armstrong putting one in the stanchion,
4-1.
Hitting four of the best goals I've ever seen at Molineux in a cup game. So there seems to be one of them teams who've had the best over us for quite some time. Yeah. I'd love to think we'll keep it similar if everybody's fit. Everyone will start the same, even with Sarabia, because we've had that. We have had good performances with him on that left side. I would be happy if Podence come in there, by the way, but if he doesn't, I'll be comfortable with it. If Lamina's injured, you'd suspect Neves comes in. My worry is this is the kind of game where he sort of rips the scripts up and does something completely different. We could end up with going back to 4-3-3 with Gomez through the middle because Costa's throwing his toys out of the pram. Is he going to punish him? You can just see him doing something a little bit unnecessary and messing the system up. I hope he doesn't. I hope he sticks to what we've done and keeps it similar. Costa up front, the two in midfield if Lamina's fit. If he's not, Neves comes in. I wouldn't play with it too much because we were really effective for those 35 minutes. But I've just got a little suspicion he might go three midfield because I'll be worried about Palace's physical presence there.
Absolutely, I do agree. I think I'd like to keep it quite similar. I do think there's a reason we didn't play Adama with all that space. I think he's keeping him fresh for that game. I think he took Costa off, protected him because, I mean, he had about 9 months off playing football. He's only just got himself fit after an injury. He has been playing quite well. I think this was more a case of protecting Costa, even though I'd rather play a full game out and deal with what we've got afterwards. What also worries me, Tyler, is the fullback area because it's such a demanding area for the style of play that Wolves play. I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of changes in the fullback areas on Tuesday.
Yeah, I was thinking this today, but Bueno for Totti makes sense, but we've all just talked about how big and physical Palace are, so you probably want Totti playing, don't you, really? I don't see anyone coming in at right back. I'd rather have Nocky at right back than Jono, so what are you doing with that one? And back four have been fine, apart from a silly penalty. They've been solid, haven't they? So I think there will be changes because it's 2 games in 3 days, isn't it? So I think you'll see Kwang, I think you'll see some legs. I don't know. I think there'll be a couple of changes. I think Nocky's right. I think there'll be 2 or 3 that might surprise us, just my opinion.
Yeah, I think I would expect not to see Mario Lamina in the squad. If a player's feeling, I mean, he didn't pull his hamstring. If he's feeling his hamstring and it's tight, you don't risk him 3 days later. A player that's nearly 30 or 30, who's been a massive influence on Wolves since he's come. We've got a massive game at Brighton and then some really difficult fixtures. You do not risk that guy. If Ruben Neves is fit, like for like, different style of player, put him in there with Joe Gomez. That's your 2-man midfield.
Gomez tired though. I think he was outstanding, but he noticeably tired.
Yeah, you can't keep up that work rate though. It's impossible.
No, you can't. So whether or not we go back to the old days of Neves and Moutinho, who knows? You don't know. But I'd be tempted if maybe Gomez have got it in him to put Nunes inside and Adama, like you said.
A bit of positive.
I'd want to keep that 4-4-2.
A bit of positivity for Tuesday night. Andy Hand says, I'm going 2-0 for Wolves on Tuesday. That's a spirit, Andy. I hope Tyler says that in his prediction. Lee Gibbons mentions with the pace of Palace, get Adama and Breno in. I'd tend to agree with that. I do like Totti defensively, but I do think we lose out on technical ability on the left-hand side to feed players in on the left and for crosses, even though sort of his work forced the goal for Costa at home in the last game. So that's
he might want that physical presence though of him in those areas for set pieces, because they will bomb balls in the box, won't they? So I can see Totti starting.
It's going to be really interesting. Particular changes then, just before we go to our predictions and call it a night on episode 61. Between the three of us then, we agree on the centre-backs. Jose Sarr is going to be in. We think when Johnny's not going to start because we want to see Semedo. We're not sure we can trust him. We're saying Totti then, are we? Because of that, or do we want more football? Because Bueno, we're at home.
I'd go Bueno, but I think we'll go Totti for the physical element of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'll go Bueno. I'll go Bueno, but I think he'll be worried about Palace, especially at set pieces. So I think he'll want a bigger lad in there. So that's why I think he'll get the nod.
Midfield, João Gomez is an absolute no-brainer for me. I don't see Lamina being part of the squad. I think he'll be protected. He'll protect his hamstring, and whether he's back for Saturday or the week after, can't risk him. For me, that's Neves.
Are you assuming he's going to keep the same system? Because I think he might go 4-3-3.
No, I think he'll go back to foot. I think Costa starts with Kuna. I don't see any ways changing that. If Costa's fit, Costa wasn't brilliant, but he was effective, and his work allowed space for Kuna, and it was working and hurting Leicester. I'm seeing those two up front. What I would like though is Adama was very good away at Palace, and he scored a really good goal. I think Adama starts and comes in for Matheus Nunes, and on the left,
big call. Matheus against Chelsea and Brentford. Big call.
That's why I think he'll go 4-3-3, because I think he'll want Nunes in the midfield, and I think he'll want Adama wide if he's going to play him. And I think he'll want that support through the middle.
I think it's important, though, whether it's an off-skew 4-3-3 or a 4-4-2, Costa and Kuna have to be playing close together regardless, because without that, we've seen Costa isolated, he's no good to us. Kuna isolated by himself, he's no good to us. So even if it is three up front, two of those need to be close together, and one of the others go to the other side. This has been episode 61 of the Wolves Report with Mark Knott, Chris Tyler, and myself, Ryan Leicester. Shorter show this week because we've got Palace on Tuesday, and wanted to get a show out just before that. On to predictions, gentlemen. Tyler, we'll start with you. Wolverhampton Wanderers beat Crystal Palace on Tuesday night, 7:30 kickoff. Don't be late, it's early this week.
0-0.
And you know what, Tyler? I'm absolutely taking your arm off for that. Okay, who's going to have the first corner then if you're having 0-0 for not having first goal scorer?
The snooker's on and I'm missing it for this, so come on, get a move on.
Nocky?
I think it's got 1-1 written all over it. I think Palace will score first. And I think let's go with a Ruben Neves goal to make it 1-1.
Well, absolutely take that. I'm going to go with Wolves 2, Palace 0, and I'm going to keep saying him. I missed him last week. I'm going to say Kuna to open up the scoring. Hope you've enjoyed the show. This has been episode 61. Thank you to Director of Football, Chris Tyler. Thank you to Club Captain Mark Knock. I've been your host, Ryan Leicester. Up the Wolves.